I've been coming to the COPs for 12 years now and trying to establish memes that tell the truth rather than the merde that's being peddled in the plenary. My name's Stuart Scott. Here's a contact email address, and I'll give it again at the end. Now, I wanted to deliver this monologue without having to read it, but you'll understand why I'm reading it in a moment. I've got cancer. If I'm any judge of it, my cancer came from the stress that I've subjected myself to year after year, attempting to bring the urgent truth about climate change to a forum that deals in platitudes, compromise, and is essentially owned and controlled by the very corporations and nations that are knowingly trading the future of humanity for profit. ExxonMobil is a poster child, but there are so many others. Here's a photo taken of me at COP15 in Copenhagen. It's a metaphor of what I had taken on before that and in all the years since. I've produced these press conferences turned TV programs for years with no financial support, lest I subject myself to the controls that funding places upon those who accept it. For example, the Sierra Club, a world-famous defender of the environment, will not talk negatively about the meat industry, since that is one of their major donors. I now have a volunteer support staff from around the world, having established a reputation of unfailingly telling the truth here at the annual COPs, the annual kick the can down the road ritual, with outcomes that are inadequate, unenforceable, and always subordinate to the demand for economic growth. Don't get me wrong, the UN means well, but they are under the same delusion that economic growth will be our salvation, when in fact it spells our doom. Continued economic growth is incompatible with human survival. Live with it. My cancer has both been fortunate and unfortunate for me. The unfortunate part is obvious. I'm fighting for my life against some rogue DNA that consumes my body's resources for its own exponential growth, ignorant of the limits of its world, the inevitable consequence of that growth being its own demise. Does that sound familiar? In this sense, our current economic system, not the only one possible, mind you, but the one that benefits bankers in the financial sector the most, is the cancer foisted upon us in the neoliberal coup at the University of Chicago in the last century. Make no mistake, our present existential predicament is the result of nearly all nations accepting or having forced upon them a disastrously flawed economic model called neoclassical growth economics. Our present growth economics is the cancer that has infected humanity, and as sure as I am here before you, it will kill us if we don't wake up and change it. So what about my cancer is fortunate? Well, it's made me more grateful for life, for all the beauty and perfection of our biosphere that has been honed by Mother Nature over billions of years. This is the Gaia spirit, the spirit of the living earth, which our neoclassical economics refuses to understand, no less accept. It's not a curse, but rather a mixed blessing when I wish cancer upon the Trumps and Bolsonaros of the world, the bankers and financiers, the corporate CEOs, and the countless other lesser corrupt players who control nations, banks, and corporations under the false god of economic growth, that is, economic cancer. Perhaps if they had to face their own imminent mortality, they might straighten up, repent of the crimes against humanity and nature, and alter course in a way that might enable human survival. Now, this is the cover photo from an article that appeared on media and reprinted in several places. And it was titled, "How Tech's Richest Plan to Save Themselves After the Apocalypse." It was written by Douglas Rushkoff, who we'll hear from in a moment. And he said it was by far the biggest fee that he had ever been offered in all the presentation he makes.
It was a big money talk out in this giant resort place out in the West. And it turned out it was just 5 hedge fund billionaire guys were brought into the green room. I never got to the stage. There was no stage. There was no audience. And they started by asking me regular sort of investing questions. And then it came down to questions like, where should I put my bunker? In New Zealand or Alaska? Which is going to do better in a global warming situation? Or these strange apocalypse questions, like the one that it finally came down to was, how do I maintain control of my security force after the event? Meaning the event is like, the sort of the Mr. Robot computer hack apocalypse revolution thing that forces them all into their bunkers, because after the event, their money's not worth anything. So how do they keep their security guards from just taking over the compound? It was bizarre. I mean, I tried to give them some answers. I mean, the main answer I had was that why do they need to see the future as this inevitable catastrophe that the best they can do with their money is insulate themselves from it, rather than using the tremendous power they have to invest, to create, to build, to develop, to avoid that kind of scenario. But they really saw themselves as powerless, and that was really the shock for me, that the super wealthy are really investing in how can they escape from the world they're creating with their business activity, rather than how can they do business activity to make a world that they would want to actually live in.
Now here's a very informative video clip for you.
This is the Hills golf course near Arrowtown. Ironically, the clubhouse is known to members as The Bunker. Trey Ratcliffe wanted to meet me here because he had remembered a time where he had found himself inside an actual survival bunker here in Queenstown.
I have a art collector who's bought a bunch of my pieces. And we got to be pretty good friends. He really trusted me. And so one day he goes, "Trey, come on over." So I came over to his place. He goes, "I need you to help me with something." And suddenly I was helping him carry a ton of gold bricks down into his bunker.
Are you joking?
Yeah. I was like, man, this guy really trusts me.
Gold bricks?
Yeah.
Did it kind of look like it was set up to survive and they could close the door and sort of live down there?
Yeah, I think he could live down there.
Did he seem like that's what he was preparing to do?
I don't know. We didn't talk too much about it. I was just kind of looking around and amazed. We didn't spend a lot of bunker convo time. I just kind of helped him carry that stuff, and then we went off and had a wine.
Just a normal Saturday in Queenstown?
Yeah.
So Rushkoff was telling the truth. Now, let's switch focus a little bit to another famous, supposedly the most wealthy man on earth, Jeff Bezos, CEO of Amazon. And here he is appearing at a presentation of Amazon's climate pledge, which was a response to the discovery or the revelation of the huge carbon footprint that Amazon has. This year, approximate dates, September of this year. This was pure, unadulterated greenwash. Because if you take a look what Jeff Bezos is doing, he has another company, a subsidiary, that's trying to get off planet Earth. And the public interface is that we can have these colonies in outer space. Here he is, Jeff Bezos, making his presentation, making his pitch in an article that I found on the Washington Post. Again, this year, earlier this year, before his greenwash in September. But I want to point out the advertisement on the page, which I couldn't get rid of, I couldn't print it out in a way that the advertisement would disappear. And I want to point out that this was the Washington Post, both because Jeff Bezos owns the Washington Post. Trump wants to return to the moon. Jeff Bezos is among those vying to help. But the growing space industry has sensed an opportunity in the White House's passion for space, and on Thursday, Jeff Bezos made his pitch to join the effort. This is what presidents seem to do when they want to distract the population from problems here on Earth. George Bush W., the son, wanted to return us to space. They want to distract us. So this was absolute, complete bullshit. Oh, and by the way, another article from The Guardian revealing that Amazon employees are left to suffer after workplace injuries. Amazon made its CEO the wealthiest person in the world. So why can't the company care for those injured while working there? He may be the richest man on earth, but that also makes him the biggest sleazeball on earth. And here's another interesting coincidence. The Amazon rainforest was being destroyed at an accelerating rate, shown from these photographs from satellites, all the while Amazon.com was becoming the world's biggest retailer. There are Amazon's profits. Oh, wait a second. What's this gap about? Might it be funding his efforts to get off the planet? Well, it's sure not improving workplace conditions. So is it a coincidence that Amazon rainforest is being burned and bulldozed while Amazon.com becomes the biggest retailer on earth? No coincidence. They both have the same driver. Our current system of neoclassical growth economics, along with greed and corruption thrown in for good measure. In neoclassical economics, destruction of the biosphere is considered an externality. Here in May of 1981, Time magazine ran this cover. It was dawning on people that we were producing generations of people who were only considering money. And that's what's driven us where we are. That's what's in the next room. That's what's in the plenary, negotiating for the well-being of citizens. But let's get back on track. Isn't there another multi-billionaire interested in space exploration? Anybody recognize the man on the right? Elon Musk. Here he is making one of his pitches. Different plan, but I wonder if they are on the phone with one another once in a while. This multi-billionaire believes there's a 70% chance he moves to Mars. Do you think they know something we don't know? Remember that story? You think they have bunkers somewhere? Coming back down to earth, let's take a look at Chile, the rebellion that relocated COP25, and the deep reasons it happened, not a tiny fare increase, as was reported.
Well, there's various slogans being used in the protest. There's one that's used a lot, which is Chile despertó, which means Chile has woken up. A culmination of grievances, of debt, of poverty, of inequality, of poor public services, of people dying in hospitals because there's a lack of medicine. It's not 30 pesos, this was just the trigger. It's 30 years of neoliberal tyranny that they've been living through. And really it's more than 30 years, it's more than 46 years because the model began through the butchery of Chilean democracy under the Pinochet dictatorship. Common slogan being used in Chile today is that neoliberalism was born in Chile and it will die in Chile. Neoliberalism is this extreme form of capitalism that was created by a guy called Milton Friedman and those around him at the University of Chicago Chicago. And the interesting thing about Chile was that Chilean students were sent to the University of Chicago to study with Milton Friedman, and they became disciples of his. When the coup took place, these Chicago boys, as they were known, were the ones at the forefront of advising and implementing the neoliberal shock therapy that was put in place in Chile that went along with the murder, the assassination, the concentration camps, the torture. So they were both key elements to the model that was put in place under Pinochet to repress those that were against this. It's really important to remember the levels of violence and repression that accompanied this bloody birth of neoliberalism, which was then used as a model in places like the UK under Thatcher, in the US under Reagan.
Which was then used as a model in places like the UK under Thatcher and the US under Ronald Reagan. To quote another neoliberal US president, it's the economy, stupid. Bill Clinton. Well, here's a cartoon that came out earlier this year with Bill Clinton on the left and our wonderful Greta on the right. It's the planet, stupid. So I want to go to a part that I've laid out called Villains and Heroes, and I wish I had another hour because I would have many lists to present. First, the villains. The category that I chose as most important is nations and their leaders. And I'll give 5. But actually 3, 4, and 5 are occupied jointly by Prime Minister Viktor Orban of Hungary, President Miloš Zeman of the Czech Republic, and President Andrzej Duda of Poland. And their distinguished behavior, what I call their being unwanted by current and future generations, for crimes against humanity. All 3 stand accused of sabotaging the EU's vague proposal for decarbonization by 2050. All 3 have decreased environmental protection and thwarted dissent, including the dismantling of democratic institutions in their respective nations, and yet they're still part of the EU. Poland, Hungary, and Czech Republic refused to sign up to text that activists already viewed as too vague. Now, more recently, in fact, just a couple of days ago, the EU Parliament declared a climate emergency. But the bloc warned against making symbolic gestures not backed up by concrete actions. What do you think is really going to happen? More talk. And this again was a few days before, as was recognized in The Guardian, intended to demonstrate Europe's green credentials just days before a crucial UN climate conference in Madrid. More greenwash. Not the Guardian article, the EU Parliament declaring a climate emergency, which is non-binding. In second place, Brazil's President Jair Bolsonaro, a criminal of huge proportions. Also wanted for crimes unwanted, for crimes against current and future generations. Approach with caution because he relies on thugs as enforcers. He has no ethical constraints upon his behavior. He's a manipulator of facts and public emotions, has implemented a program to destroy the Amazon rainforest for commercial exploitation. His God is money, and all other considerations be damned. And recently even had the temerity, the balls, the cojones, to accuse Leonardo DiCaprio of starting the fires.
Right now, the Amazon rainforest is being consumed by fire. In fact, there's an 80% increase in fires just over the last year alone. And this comes, of course, after the hottest July our planet has ever seen. I want you to take a look at these pictures showing the smoke from space. These are images from high above covering huge parts of South America. Now, this isn't an act of God. It's farmers and ranchers intentionally destroying the land for more development.
This is the president of Brazil. And of course, everyone can guess who's in number 1 position. US President Donald Trump. Here are some of his better expressions. also unwanted by current and future generation for crimes against humanity and nature. Also approach with caution. He also uses thugs at his campaign rallies, at least. He's dangerous, devious, and a corrupt deceiver. He's got multiple conflicts of interest, collusion with corporations against the well-being of Americans and people everywhere. He's currently under investigation for obstruction of justice and violations of the US Constitution. However, he's extremely charismatic and a con man with great appeal to ideologues and ultranationalists. He's attempting to scuttle what little progress has been made under the Paris Accord on climate change, despite his having applied for a seawall to protect his golf course in Scotland on the basis of expected climate change. Now, as we sometimes jokingly say in New York, would you buy a used car from that man? Look at that smile. Toothy grin, we call it. So let's turn our attention for a little bit to a few of the heroes. These are the defenders of the truth in a world of lies and deception, with a public eager to have current existential threats kept hidden in order to continue consuming without guilt. So the heroes that I'd like to recognize, first, Jane Fonda, famous actress, the daughter of another famous actor, Henry Fonda, who recently uprooted her life and moved to Washington, D.C., to be more of an activist, and in her words, to get arrested. Here's Jane making good. Second, I'd like to recognize Amy Goodman, who you may or may not know, who's a journalist, truth teller, and whose 20 years of Democracy Now! Programs, which are emblematic in the United States of the truth about our situation. She could never be bought by advertising. Never took an ad.
I'm Amy Goodman.
That's Amy Goodman, and she's here with Democracy Now! And has a booth and will be doing interviews all this week. And three, how could I not? This girl is the closest thing we have to a savior on climate change. Vaulted into the public imagination through her bravery. First, she converted her parents to vegans. Then her mother stopped flying for a world-famous operatic career and became a local singer at concerts and whatnot. And then she said she was going to strike outside the Swedish parliament every day until the elections. And they said, that we cannot support you in. And she did it anyhow. And that's her original sign. I've been the host and the only guest today. Here's my email address if you want to get in touch again. Excuse me for being slow to respond. And I've been coming to you live from the UN climate negotiations, COP25 in Madrid. Thank you very much. Donald Trump came into office with a slogan that he was going to drain the swamps in Washington of all the lobbyists that were there. Instead, he hired them. This is the flag of the United Kleptocracy of America.